Are we starting now?
Yeah.
Alright, so for our presentation we decided that the empire represents an attempt to rationalize the irrational and to create a facade over the individualistic nature of humanity. That is counterpointed by the Gothic, which is the real, the pulling back of the curtain and trying to show the true expression of individual. The conclusion for our argument is that through analysis and self-reflection we can pierce the veil of control by achieving some form of enlightenment.
Okay, we'll start off with the Hofburg, which is the seat of imperial power. The Hofburg represents military power and the ruling class. Next is Schönbrunn. The beautiful grounds and the bright colors of the palace match the inner turmoil of the Empress Sissi and the rest of the house's occupants. Next is the Prague Castle. The Prague Castle is similar to the Hofburg. The empire is trying to be presented in the same fashion to all of their subjects. From the mistake in the sign, you can see a small example of defiance and the possibly deliberate misspelling of Anna, which means but. This is the next example. This is the similar architecture of the Prague Castle. And this is a statue. This statue symbolizes man struggling against nature. The line represents the power of the empire trying to control human desire.
And in the same city, we have the Ringstrasse, which is one of the crowning achievements of the Emperor Franz Joseph. But when you look at what sort of structures populate the Ringstrasse, you see a lot of Gothic architecture, which is sort of an antithesis to the Hofburg itself. Here we have the plague statue, which sort of represents the repressed fears of the population, as well as Schönbrunn, which symbolically lies in the middle of the city, sort of also expressing the fears of the population, and it forms a duality with the imperial structures that are present there. This can also be seen in the Prague Castle after walking through the gilded gates that are very similar to the Hofburg. Again, in the very center courtyard, you have this Gothic structure representing the fears and angst of the imperial subjects. Another byproduct of the empire was Franz Kafka, which is sort of represented here with this Gregor Samsa-esque bug gargoyle. And Kafka, he saw the thinness and the lack of depth in the overcomplicated imperial machine, and felt alienated by it, much like many of the other subjects, and produced Gothic literature due to that. A more faithful representation of Gothic and Empire is the Bone Church, because the imperial powers were continuing the work of a blind madman who was creating an homage to death, and yet they took it as a symbol of imperial power, and therefore sort of created a true-to-life statement about the real meaning of empire without intending to.
Here we have Konopishte, which represents the desire for escape into the wilderness, and then we also have here an example of Ferdinand's slaughter of hundreds of thousands of animals, which was an attempt to replicate and explain the dream state and to cut out the wilder impulses of humanity. Here we have a reminder that empire is not limited to just Austria-Hungary, but also extends throughout the world wherever power consolidates. Here's Meyerling, which is where Rudolf escaped, eventually in the form of his own suicide and the death of his mistress. This is an image here of Crown Prince Rudolf. It's a death scene from when he was lying in state. Here, this is how the Gothic has overtaken the empire's facade and revealed the darker side of power and rigidity. So you either have to bend or break. Here we have Freud's couch. This is the rise of the analytical thought and self-reflexive thought against the dictates of the empire. We might consider Kant's enlightened man. Here we have Freud staring directly into the camera, which I think you could take as a recognition of the panopticon and the all-seeing eye of Michel Foucault, and there is no getting away from the fact that you are under constant observation. Finally, we have a dreamer here. She's in the dream state herself, and eventually will wake up to find that The other side of the bed is cold and empty. The dead mask there just representing the fact that in the end you're alone.
The end.